Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for yet another edition of the Economic Times Money Gurukul. With COVID disrupting the world in many ways and affecting the livelihoods of people, it has become extremely important for everyone to be cautious about stepping out. In the recent past, we have witnessed how cases in several states have spiked and how newer strains are imposing new dangers. Dealing with the unforeseen challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has taken a significant toll on people across the world. In such turbulent times, vaccines come as a ray of hope. Not only does the vaccine offer us a relief from the virus, but makes us believe that we might return to normalcy soon. The fear of losing lives is slowly melting away, and there is a renewed sense of confidence that the virus can be defeated. Similarly, today's session, Money Gurukul, with the theme of COVID to COVID, from extreme fear to hope, will aim to calm down all nerves about money matters in your personal life from the point of view of investments. We have for you a power-packed panel of speakers who are doyens in their segments. In today's session, our speakers will touch upon the points: fear, hope, greed, the emotions that rule the world of investing. Understanding the common biases, your vaccine against the negative effects of emotion. Let me now introduce you to our speakers that we have lined up today. We have with us Mr. K.S. Rao. He is the Senior Vice President and Head, Investor Education and Distribution Development at Aditya Birla Sun Life AMC Limited. Joining him is Mr. Amit Trivedi, who is an author, speaker, blogger, and trainer. And we also have Dr. Kavita Ranganathan with us today, who is an Associate Professor, Finance and Strategy, TA by Management Institute, Manipal. I welcome you all to this session. This discussion is going to provide the listeners with a lot of food for thought and inspiration during these tumultuous times. So over to you, Mr. K.S. Rao, to take things further.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dimple. Good evening to all. Thanks, Dr. Kavita and Amit, for joining us. It's indeed a great opportunity to be with you this evening in this session. And good evening to each one of you for joining us. And indeed, it's a great to see good number of people joining us this evening. Wish each one of you are doing well and your loved ones, you are taking utmost care of your own self. This session, further to what Dimple said, what we do is I quickly run through what we intend to cover, and then after that we will have questions with Amit and Dr. Kavita. And in the meanwhile, any questions you have, please do post in Q&A part, Q&A side, or even if it is in the chat section, preferably on the Q&A, so that we can address each of these questions. Thanks once again for being here, and it is the topic today. We talk about COVID to COVID, and it is honestly over last 1 year to now, it is a fear, hope, and fear. And again, we are back to the fear. I think some part of the time it could be a greed, but what are that? In this process, what are our biases, how we need to address, and currently what kind of emotions we have, and what exactly we need to do it. And it's somebody said we are not only sometimes irrational, but we are predictably irrational. And it's our emotions and our decisions making process is hardwired into our brains. And this is developed some time back, it's 100,000 years back, all that coming from the survival of African savanna. And today that survival from the African jungle or to the productive jungle of the world of finance, both are not one and the same, but how we do need to handle. I think Benjamin Graham, father of value investing, he says the investor's chief problem and even the worst enemy is he or she himself, herself or himself. And of course, it is an Indian scriptures. If you can look at Bhagavad Gita talks about the same. It is all that your mind makes the difference, what not the market is making the difference. It's where we need to look at and how we need to prepare for it. And we don't need to predict for it, how we need to prepare for whatever is happening and whatever is going to happen. And Lao Tzu says, those who those who have knowledge don't predict, those who predict do not have the knowledge. In this process today, we are not going to predict anything, but we are going to prepare. We are going to have some conversations. It is our journey, which is starting from lock, unlock, and relock. It is a survival for us. It's a life, livelihood, and lifestyle. Probably what we can get into these learning sessions through Money Gurukul, or it's a pleasure to be partnering with them. I take privilege from Aditya Birla Sun Life Asset Management, partnering with Money Gurukul over last 4 years. And it's an honor to be part of this association consistently over 4 years. And all that what we need to do is learn, unlearn, and relearn. That should be a process, that should be a cycle. And today we talk about COVID to COVID. What exactly the COVID to COVID? And COVID, it's last year, the panic, we were very panic, and it was, I think we adapted to this world of WFH, work from home. Today, most of us are in the lockdown and we are working from home. And it's as Dimple said, that vaccine has given a hope for all of us. And some of us would have got at least one shot of that vaccine. The others are waiting for that. I mean, most of us will get vaccinated in the very soon. Probably we are getting prepared to get ourselves better. But our focus is, we are working from WFH, but our focus is HFW. That is, our health is the most important part. Health is wealth. I think truly it is proved currently. And the second biggest focus is our family, our loved ones, and our friends. And third comes it's the wealth. But what is that we need to do it? And it's a co-win, is a collective win. And the COVID has become such a negative word for us because like positive has also become a negative word. If somebody has to become COVID positive, then that's the most dangerous negative word for us. And we need to be COVID negative and attitude positive. And what we need to do is our collective win is the most important part of it. That collective win is nothing but WIN, what is important now, how we do and what we do. 2020 to 2021, things have changed. We were a little optimistic and things were recovering. A virus, crisis, survival, recession to a vaccine opportunity, cautious optimism to the revival. But unfortunate part in the last 2 months is the second wave, which has dampened some part of us, and it is truly created havoc to many of us. And we have seen that pain. I think most of us are undergoing that pain. Please do take care of yourself and your health. And if it looks like the market today market is holiday, but if we can look at market, looking that it is decoupled, irrespective of what is statistics, you and me are worried about COVID statistics, but market looks not worried and things are looking better. But what is worrying is our psychology, how we are behaving in this cycle. What is that behavior? Today with us, we have Dr. Kavita, who is going to talk to about investor psychology, what is behavioral finance is facing and how that is impacting. I think if you have attended earlier Mr. Amit's session, I think one of his book is Roller Coaster Ride, how you can handle that roller coaster ride of the stock market today. And what is the psychology today? Either some of us are very cautious, over cautious, and some of us indifferent, that is aggressive, nothing will happen kind of it. But most of us, 90% of us, we may stand in between of these two scales. And it is like, some of us who believe the market will crash, some of us will believe the market will not crash. It is a new normal. But it's like some of us will be saying which side the scale will go. How can I take care of my money? How I want to have a safe bet. If I am very cautious, I will get out of the market fully. If I am not, then I can put a lot of money back into the market. But what is the way advantage is I can take in between path, how I can look at what is that, how I can have my right asset allocation, how I can do adhere to my asset allocation, what is the diversification I can adapt, and I go back to the basics and stick to my rebalancing. How do I manage my risk better? How not to be get panicked and I should not get out of the markets, and how I can make how I can have a friend who can be a right advisor for me, who can guide me at this point of time. And it is like these are the multiple options we have. What is that we need to do? We all need to take individual calls, and the personal finance person comes before the finance, and it's different from each one of us. And all that what we need to is stay hooked to ourselves, our emotions, understand our biases, understand our emotions, what we can do today. Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist and who is the winner of the Nobel Prize, he says psychology has a story to tell about investing. It is different from the one from the economic tells. And it's all that psychology, how it makes a difference for us. I think history never repeats, but the man always does. This is what Voltaire says. It's like, let us see what we can do differently. There are multiple emotions drivers. There are thousands of emotions. But when it comes to our investments, there could be 5 investments, which can be a predominantly. It is a fear, hope, and greed, and overconfidence and regret. There is fear of missing out and we would like to get, our fear is a fear of something we heard and we want to get out and I don't want to be in the market. Or there is always a hope and optimism, or sometimes excessive optimism, or to get the capitalize the opportunity, that could be a greed. And sometimes we are overconfident on what we know because we were very successful in the last 1 year on our investments and we feel we know everything. And some of us who have not taken any decision and we may be regretting why I have not taken a decision. And some of us have taken a decision that I want to redeem during the peak and I've lost that money, then there is a regret. How we can handle, then we can look at how this Bregman effect is happening, not only on the vaccination, even on the investment decisions. It is a denial, anger, bargaining, depression to the acceptance. And today, probably some of us at this is the pandemic, we are accepting and we are moving on. And what is that next you need to do is how I can protect myself, how I can get myself immune. And all that when I'm investing my money to on the financial planning, it is what I need to do is the first and foremost is I have to protect my wealth, protect what I have, and then wealth accumulation. And the last one is the wealth distribution. And wealth distribution has also become equally important at this point of pandemic, because we do not know the kind of pain people have undergone. I have seen many such cases, my own colleagues, their parents, suddenly they disappeared overnight. And this is the transfer of wealth, how utmost care we need to do. Take care. And what are the biases we need to understand? It could be a present bias, it could be a recency bias, it could be an overconfidence bias, it could be a choice paralysis, it could be herd mentality, it could be a confirmation bias, it could be a heart-earned bias, or it could be a loss aversion bias. It is predominantly, I keep talking, I keep joking, little, we are the people LIC biased. Either we have a loss aversion, or we have an impatience, or we are conservative. All these biases, and let us have a conversation with Dr. Kavita, and some of those questions we can ask her and get those answers. She has done amazing research, and she is one of those great professors who have gone in depth on the behavioral finance. And let us understand, then what is the status quo bias, how we can look at there. And apart from that, what are those 5 lessons of the personal finance we have learned? Probably the first part is, all of us, we understood building an emergency fund, having an emergency fund is very good. And that will build not only the comfort and confidence that we need to have the cash reserve to meet the current requirements, but that is also protected our existing portfolio not to sell in the losses and not to take any call, not to get panic. And it has built as a cushion to us. It has helped us to hedge our investments. And emergency fund need has definitely proved us. And some of us, probably we would have started emergency fund in a big way. Earlier, we called 3 to 6 months. Probably it is now 6 to 9 months or 9 to 12 months. It depends on the person to person, kind of the situation you are into it. And adequate health insurance and life insurance, we all need to look, and that is a must, because some of us would have ignored, some of us would have neglected, some of would not have paid the premium, but we know that importance. These are the one we can't avoid, and it has to be the must, and we need to look at time to time. And this is the time we need to go back. Is it adequate? Do I need to get excessive insurance, or do I need to look at, and I need to talk to my advisor? And never dampen your spirit. Your long-term goals remains the same irrespective of the pandemic playing the whale. Our retirement will be retirement. Our children education remains a children education. And at the most, it may be getting delayed. It may be getting little postponed, but our focus should not get deviate. If you have first one emergency fund, your long-term goals, you continue to do what you want to do it. And our risk appetite keeps changing. You are very biased. During the good times, you would like to take more risk. During the bad times, you want to get out of the risk. Probably understanding our own behavior and understanding our own risk appetite is the most important thing, and we can invest according to our risk appetite. And the last but not the least, this pandemic is proved once again, estate planning is the most necessity. Do you have your will? Have you written your will? If not, you have written the will, at least have you checked your nominations? Are they in the place? Or the will is the most better way to understand and put it in such a way, this pandemic. If not anything on the will, at least ensure, have you kept all your investments at one place? It is at multiple places. I have seen people are emotionally gone. I mean, there is a loss of life, loss of like the family is into the grief, but where the investments are there, nobody knows. And this is the situation. We are all into the electronic. Our gadgets are carrying our passwords, and we have not kept it. Probably during the end of the session, we will provide a link. You can download a book that can provide you you can write those investments at one place, and you can look at. And end of it, before I conclude and invite Amit and Dr. Kavita, it is all that what we need to do is there are 2 things to look at to make simplify our life. What can I influence now? Circle of concern, nothing to worry. Lesser you pay attention, more comfortable you are. That circle of concerns could be, how I can limit limit time spent on such things. You don't have any control on that. What is the government policy? How the vaccine is coming in? What could be the COVID statistics? How it is changing? What kind of politics emerging? What kind of news it is changing? what is others' behavior, or talking about infrastructure, talking about vaccine availability, or social media and the economy. All that we do not have any control. What you have a control is on your own life and your own way you live it. I always call it my GDP, my goals, my dreams, and my plans. And your health and finance. Are you taking enough care for your health? Are you taking enough care for your finance? Are you eating right? Are you sleeping well? Are you meditating better? Are you limiting the news? Are you excessive utilizing social media? Can you contain the social media? And can you look at your, this is the whole exercise I was looking at, the oxygen, lack of oxygen people talk about. One of my friends who got just discharged from the hospital in Chennai after 16 days, and he was coming to me, and he is in Ramzan fasting now. And after the 3 days back, he got discharged, and he says he paid something around 600,000 rupees for his oxygen for 6 days. And he says, Isha Allah, I've breathed so much of free air God has given for the last 54 years. I have not paid a single pie. I think it is a time for us to take care of ourselves and look that breathing can happen. It is not auto mode, but can I do that consciously, do something? And can I be mindfulness and meditation? The need has come now. And it's a gratitude. I think, every day morning we get up in the morning, all friends are safe. That is a great way. Thank Lord. And thanks to everyone. And all that we need to be cautious. And I think, my yoga instructor, she was telling me, I used to say the word I'm scared. She said, don't use the word scared. You can say be cautious. The moment you say scared, you are attracting the scared, and either scarcity nor the scarefulness, both are not good for us. Neither the lack, we need to think of the abundance, and we need to be a little cautious. And let us get back, and we need to go and support a lot of people, humanity. It's a philanthropy, is a way of life, and let us support each other. I think resolution 1 is let us not get affected by COVID. Resolution 2 is let us not pass on the COVID to the next person, or the news of the panic of the COVID to the next person. Third is help as many people as possible so that they come out. Then we can manage our finances better with a mindfulness. I stop here, and I wish you all stay healthy, stay wealthy. And I'll invite my friends um, Amit and Kavita for this session to start. Thank you so much for both of you. And indeed, it's an honor to have both. I'll start my first question. Probably we call it the ladies first, but let me use a different one, roller coaster ride. I'll go first. Maybe I'll go with the alphabetical order for a change. Okay. And Amit, we are going through this unprecedented times over last 15 months, or we thought everything is over and everything is come back. And now we have come back to the lockdowns again. And this is a second wave looks more dangerous, and the word dangerous itself is dangerous to us. And there is a psychological impact on financial decisions we take. Just before we were having a conversation with Dr. Kavita, how the people are behaved very differently. Can you throw some light how that is behaving, how that is shaping up?
So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me for this panel, Rao sir, and thanks ET Money Gurukul also for this superb initiative of reaching out to people in these times. Now, one of the things that I realized when I wrote that book, Riding the Roller Coaster, is that the extreme times actually amplify the human behavior. The emotions are magnified in the extremes. And this is precisely what we are seeing right now also. On one hand, you see a lot of people coming out to help in big way to those who need oxygen, hospital beds, etc., or medicines. And on the other hand, there are stories of hoarders and black marketers. So you are actually seeing those things magnified. And similar things are happening also in the investment world. There are people who are scared and the fear is magnified. And many of them, like we were discussing the other day, many of them stop their SIPs, or many of them redeem their money from various investments, not just mutual funds, but otherwise also. On the other hand, there is a separate set of people who probably get a little overexcited because of a lot of time at hand and not many avenues to spend. And because there was surplus saving, they started investing in various avenues and started taking risks. So you actually see two different sets of behaviors emerging during this entire 15 odd month period. So you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Amit, for such a opening that in a very broad spectrum. And there is multiple kinds of behaviors we are seeing. Yes, I could see last few days. I mean, I stay in Bangalore. The pain is much, much higher here. I mean, I was looking at how the difficulty on procuring a bed to other. And I also seen there is voluntary organizations, the volunteers, the kind of work they do is phenomenal. And all said and done today, when we talk about the emotions for investment, I go back to Dr. Kavita. Kavita, could you please explain briefly about some of the times, some of the trends which are emerging during the times? And it is over last 15 months. Probably, you would have widely understood what the studies, what are coming in, how investors are behaving with their money, and what kind of a role of the emotions taking the financial decisions. And during this time, which are the emotions predominantly there? So that later we can understand what emotions we can regulate, what we can control, or what we cannot control.
Yeah, so thank you once again, and I think it's lovely to be here. Every time you invite me, it's basically, it's a reflection for myself as well, and I'm really happy to kind of discuss how behavioral sciences as such as a field can in fact help us regulate our emotions and perhaps take us to this path of making better investment decisions. So thank you to you, Rao sir. Thank you to ET Money Gurukul. I think these are very important conversations which we need to have, especially like you said in your opening, that it has to be positive and we need to reinforce positivity amongst us. And that's how we are going to at least get through this, this turbulent times, right? So yeah, so coming to your question on emotions, so let me go back to one of the seminal research which is there in behavioral sciences. You showed the picture of Daniel Kahneman. So there is a very interesting paper written by Kahneman and Tversky. So these are Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. They were two colleagues, and apparently they came up with this very interesting research piece during their evening walks. They used to walk together, and then and bingo, they wrote a paper which is kind of published in Econometrica and stuff. So in very simple terms, what the paper tells us is, we are human beings, and obviously, we are not like robots. We react to, we have emotions, right? So every action or every decision we make, right, it is basically fueled by emotion. So emotion is not like wrong or right. So emotions help us make decisions. Let me put it that way, right? So what Kahneman and Tversky, what they found is that the way we react or the way we make decisions is very different if the frame is gain versus the frame is loss. So which means, imagine you bought a stock, right? You spend say a lakh of rupees and bought a kind of a few stocks, and then you had a gain. So basically 1 lakh became say 1,50,000 rupees, right? So the stock price increased. What would you do? Most people, what would they do? They would sell their stock, right, when it increases. That's fine. Now, suppose you bought, same, you made an investment of 100,000 and this 100,000 became 50,000, right? So what would generally people do? What is the kind of behavior that we notice? People hold on to those losses, right? So the question that they asked is, it's absolutely nothing wrong that you hold on to losses, or basically you're unwilling to sell. But the problem comes is when you'll have to reflect on yourself. Are you being extremely risk averse in gain versus risk seeking in losses? Which means that you are selling off your winners too quickly and holding on to your losing stocks for very long. Are you doing this? If you're doing that, then you are irrational, right? So why? So they basically went on to ask, why do people do this, right? Why do they keep on holding on to their losses? Say you bought a stock for 100 bucks, it fell to 50 bucks, right? The question you need to ask yourself, so you're holding on to the stock at 50, okay? The question you need to ask yourself is, are you willing to buy more stocks at 50? If you're willing to buy more stocks at 50, then you have rationalized your behavior, right? You bought at 100, the stock fell at 50, and you're still willing to hold it because you're willing to invest more in that stock because you believe that it will go up. But if you bought the stock at 100, it fell at 50, right? And you are you're holding on to your losses and unwilling to sell it because of a fear or because of regret, that you don't want to, accept the loss, then you know that your emotions have taken, ahead of your rational sense, right? So that is the kind of, then you have to be extremely cautious. So there are lots of such behavior which has kind of spanned out during the pandemic. And yeah, and I can speak a little more as we go forward on some of the other research that I've come across.
Thank you so much, Kavita. I think I just put it on the mute because there is a noise around, and yeah, you put it very rightly. I think when we can see, when somebody can read those books like Winning Curse, Winner's Curse, or The Nudge from Richard Thaler and Kahneman, it's a very interesting. Amit, I'll come back. When it is she spoke about the stock market, and I can hold on. But when it comes to the mutual funds, most of us, I believe, we tend to invest for the long term, but still we take those decisions. We also become irrational because mutual funds, we are not looking at I'm putting my money by looking at the investments. It's like not looking at the performance, but I'll become panicky. And can you highlight some of those common emotions, biases that impact these financial decisions people will take, and which will be negatively impacting them over a period of time?
Over the years, and Kavita is going to laugh at this when I mentioned this particular bias. Over the years, what I've realized is one of the most dangerous of the biases in investing is overconfidence. And a lot of times that overconfidence has nothing to do with one's abilities, but it has a lot to do with how the investment has performed in terms of value. So I bought something, it appreciated fast, and I start becoming overconfident about my abilities, whereas my abilities have hardly played any role. And this is something that I've observed over the years in many financial instruments, and mutual fund is no exception there. So this is one. Second is now couple this overconfidence with ignorance, and it's a deadly combination. So first I did not know, I bought something, then it turned out to be good. So I'm overconfident, and then at some point that overconfidence turns into arrogance, that I'm invincible. And when that happens, then all the guards are lowered and I end up taking too much risk. So this is one of the biases that I observed practically in a lot of cases. Now, exactly where that tipping point happens from confidence to overconfidence, overconfidence to arrogance, that's something that I'm not really aware of, but somewhere it does happen. So this is one that we need to be clear about. The second is fear. And this fear often is a result of extrapolation of recent fall in the prices. So when the fall happens, then we start extrapolating that if, okay, this fund has lost, let's say 5% in a month, then it is likely to lose 60% in a year. A lot of times that's that's how the mind works. Whereas the investment markets are often cyclical. No, I mean, let's say there are ups and downs. Let's not use the word cyclical, because that cyclical also tends to give some degree of certainty in the mind that cycles are of uniform length and uniform height and depth. Whereas height and depth or length of the cycles are not known in this market. So this fear is often an extrapolation of a short drop. But there's another tendency which I've witnessed in last 1 year in particular is the markets fell very sharply and recovered also equally sharply, or actually with a vengeance they recovered, not just equally sharply. And in such a case, a lot of people just held on to their investments, which turned out to be a wise decision. But go back a few years, and if we look at 2008 to 2014 period, it was a 6 long years of period where the investors were not seeing positive returns for a long period. Now, enduring the pain is far more difficult than the intensity of pain. And this is something that Dan Ariely wrote in his book, Predictably Irrational. A short-term spike on the downside is what we saw last year. That was a little less painful, but had it continued for long period, then it would have been immensely painful. And this is where the stock market and the COVID situation seem to have decoupled. The stock market saw high intensity pain, whereas the COVID situation, and especially the second wave, is hitting home hard, and enduring that pain is not easy. So this is another phenomenon that I've witnessed. But all in all, ignorance, overconfidence are two of the things that I would strictly caution people against, because these are two things that I can be aware of. Now let's look at that overconfidence in another manner. Somebody does a lot of analysis and then takes a decision. When you do a lot of analysis and take a decision, it appears to be extremely rational decision. But as Kavita was mentioning, emotions help us take decision. And in the world of investing, there is so much happening, and there's so much data point that not a single human being can actually access all the data, assess all that data, and analyze all that data, which means we are leaving something to chance. I'm taking that leap of faith at some stage. So somebody may know 5% and take 95% leap. Somebody may know 95 and take a 5% leap of faith. But the danger is when I've got data up to 95% or 90% or 70%, whatever the proportion may be, I start getting overconfident about, once again, there's a fallacy called illusion of control. Now I've got everything under control, so nothing can go wrong. And very often something goes wrong. So these are a few things that I would like to warn people against.
Yeah. Thanks, Amit. I'll have a follow-up question for this for you. I mean, it is rightly said, investment is not always a number game, but it is a mind game. But at this point of the time, how an investor, I mean, retail investor, can construct his or her portfolio? And since these emotions are affecting, and how I need to be emotion proof and construct my portfolio?
So let's borrow from one of your favorite lines. When you can't predict, you protect and prepare. Now, a lot of times we start to get into that game of prediction, a game that most of us can't play. And just imagine what the situation was in February or early March in India. We had almost started celebrating that the pandemic is getting over, and suddenly the second wave hit us. It was impossible for anybody across the world to predict that that wave is going to hit India. Forget us, forget the lawmaker, I mean, the government of the country, forget WHO, nobody could. Now, if that's the case, how do we assume that in a world as dynamic as that of investing, will somebody be able to predict? So let's not get into that. We need some directional view, which is okay. But beyond that, we need to protect our downside and prepare. And for that purpose, a few steps need to be taken. I would like to believe that the whole game of investment management is all about risk management. If I manage the risks, then there is upside for me to take. But if I chase the upside, then I'm generally left with the risks. If that's the case, what are the risks that I'm taking? What are the risks that I want to avoid? How much risk should I take? These are choices. And I'm emphasizing on this word choice because a lot of times people are afraid of the word risk. But let's say the four broad asset categories. First of all, stocks. Stocks are volatile. There is a risk of price fluctuation. Real estate. Real estate, of course, there is price fluctuation, which is less visible, but a bigger risk in case of real estate is it is less liquid. Illiquidity is the risk. Fixed income, there is a possibility of default or a delay in the receipt of payments. Gold or silver kind of commodities, there is price fluctuation risk. Now, where do I keep money? If I want to avoid all these risks, where do I keep the money? I can only think of savings bank account or keeping money at home. Then there is no risk, right? But then what do I earn there? What I earn is less than inflation. So if I want to avoid all these risks, I take the risk of inflation. And from that point of view, it's a choice. So if this is the case, then let's look at how an investor should build the portfolio. First and foremost is starting with, why am I investing? What is my investment objective? What are my financial goals? That has to be the starting point. And based on that, then we work out which instruments would help me reach those goals, and in how many cases am I taking a higher risk or I am avoiding the risk. Third, as a rule, shorter the time horizon to the goal, lower the risk that one should take, except for the inflation risk. So you don't want to lose money on price fluctuation, you don't want to lose money on credit risk, and you don't want to lock your money for a longer period. So you avoid those risks if the time horizon is short. If the time horizon is longer, then you can afford to take those risks, and not just afford, you got to take those risks, because otherwise in the long run, inflation is a portfolio killer. If those principles are taken care of, broadly, for very short-term needs, a liquid fund, medium-term needs, a debt fund, medium to slightly short-term need, you may look at a hybrid fund, or long-term needs, you can look at equity funds. So that's how a portfolio can be constructed.
Thank you so much for such a detailed answer. And but risk is a term which will undergo definition for person to person and time to time. And it's like the Morgan Housel, what he says is money relies more on the psychology than the finance. Same is the risk relies more on the situation than the, when I'm taking an investment decision. This question I'll go to Dr. Kavita. What do you think about investors' understanding about the investment risks, as Amit said now? I mean, and are they able to clearly evaluate what kind of risk they are taking? And after taking that risk, are they evaluating, this is what adaptable risk for me, I'm sticking to it? And any studies around or any understanding around?
Okay, actually, this is quite an complex question. So let's try and break it down. So first, let us understand what we think is risk. What I come across, and there is also, again, backed by research, that we confuse risk with uncertainty, right? So what is risk is, it's simply like rolling a die, right? And what is the chance of 6 coming, right? If it's basically 1 by 6, right? That is risk, which means that the outcomes, correct? And you basically attach a probability, right? You can find out your probability because it has only 6 sides, correct? That is basically the definition of this. Now let us go back to 2019 December, right? If you met anybody on the road and basically asked them, hey, what is the chance of India, basically, that you will be locked up in your house for the next 1 year, right? Forget pandemic, forget anything. And people will say, oh, you're crazy, man. I mean, it's like, what are you talking about, right? So that is basically uncertainty. I think predominantly what we do is that we confuse these terms, risk and uncertainty. And I won't say that this is just with common investors. This is, I think, an integral problem with the industry, with the finance industry. I'm sorry to say that, but it's basically we keep confusing risk and uncertainty, right? Now, the stock market yesterday is not the same as stock market tomorrow. And there are so many things going around, right? And we're trying to predict what is the stock market tomorrow by using risk models, which can only predict what happened in the stock market yesterday. That is, I think, one of our major mistakes, what we do in the finance domain, right? Now, let me take you through some of the research papers in this domain. So recently I came across this very interesting paper, and it's done with investment professionals. And in this paper, what they did is they simply showed investment professionals different distributions. What we mean by distribution is basically, each asset class has been described graphically in terms of means and standard deviation, right? All of us will be familiar with that. You open any mutual fund brochure, you will see, these are your average returns. This is your standard deviation, which is a measure of risk, right? And then of course they go on with extremely fancy, terms like Sharpe ratio, alpha, trainers, information ratio, all that, right? So what these guys did is they didn't even go there. They simply showed people means and standard deviations of different asset classes. And they said that interpret, how do you think, how risky is this asset, by looking at the graphical representation of mean and standard deviation. And what they actually found is, so this was done across 10 countries, okay? And these were investment professionals like, portfolio managers, merchant bankers, risk analysts, and various other, investment professionals. And what they found is people were not able to evaluate risk based on means and standard deviation. This takes us to a very central question. Suppose, you see this information or you see this news that a fund A has gone up by, on average, has gone up by 20% during the last 10 years. How will you interpret this information? Many of us make this mistake. Oh, this fund A has basically gone up, right, every year in the last 20 years, right? That's a big mistake. First of all, interpreting averages without standard deviation, without reading the standard deviation, you will not be able to understand or anything or make any meaning of averages. And that is where our understanding of risks kind of, gets absolutely, convoluted, right? So again, this paper, what they did was, then they basically showed people skewed distributions, right? Positive skew, negative skew. And what they found is when people are seeing these skewed, like positive skew, right, where the standard deviation is very high in the domain of loss, correct? They found that, oh, people were able to bingo, understand, oh, this is a risky asset, right? So this understanding of risks is very complex. One, we confuse risk with uncertainty, right? And two, I think the industry has a lot of jargons out there for people to basically understand or make meaningful interpretations of what is risk. And third is the way we understand risks in losses versus risks in gains. That's where our, psychology or our emotions basically come in the forefront, right? So again, we don't behave same. We don't behave in the same manner with gains and with losses. And especially, imagine, think about it. We are all in the pandemic. We are all basically, many of us have lost a lot of money. We are not able to generate money. We are not able to earn money, right? So all of us are in extreme loss situations. The way we behave, the kind of risks that we would take extreme risks, right? We would basically take unnecessary risks, uncalculated risk, so that we want to get out of the loss, right? That is something that, again, it's risk. So it could be possible that you will be worse off. So our behavior, our emotions are very different when it is losses versus gains. So all of this makes this understanding of risks extremely complex. Again, I say this again to the industry that I think it's for us, it's for the industry, it's for us professions to, professionals to basically correct this phenomena and try and communicate risks that are best understood by common people.
Thank you so much, Kavita. But this is a follow-up question. When you are answering, I was just looking at it is not just a common man, it's not just a common investor, but even the knowledgeable people will also do such mistakes. And
Right.
When it comes to investment-related decisions, why it happens? Like, and people who have seen many cycles, like, it has happened in the past and they knew pretty well. And suddenly some decision comes, either I invest or I redeem or something I do, and which is detrimental to my own portfolio.
Right. I mean, it's a very pertinent question you asked. And like when I think about it, so let me try and explain to you another concept. So there is something called cognitive biases and emotional biases. Okay. So what are cognitive biases is like misunderstanding about certain statistics. That's a cognitive bias. Like, for example, anchoring. Right. So you were talking about the winner's curse, which predominantly happens in the IPO market. So what happens in the IPO market is that, like, so basically the issuing firm decides what's the offer price, and on the first day of listing, if the demand is very high, the price goes up, right? So many people anchor to that price and they think that that is the value of the IPO. After that, the IPO cools down, right? So obviously, from compared to the first day listing, the IPO would be much lower if you look at it after a month or so. But people are unwilling to sell it. Why? Because they say, oh, first day it rose up, it went to that price, so it will go back to that price. So this is what we call as anchoring. Okay, right? But then, so biases like anchoring or, representative bias, all these biases could be debiased using financial literacy, right? I mean, basically education and all of that, right? But think about it. If somebody is loss averse, like, like Amitji was talking about overconfidence, right? So somebody is loss averse, means losses hurt you much more. So you have regret aversion. So these are, deep entrenched emotional biases. So you cannot teach somebody, right, that don't be regretful, don't have greed, or, don't feel bad if you have, I mean, don't feel remorse. So these kind of biases is very difficult to be debiased, even amongst professionals. The classic example is overconfidence bias, right? So that is the reason I think that that's also maybe a primary reason why even investment professionals kind of make these uh, mistakes, which is because emotions, it does not, emotions get over whether you are an experienced person or whether you are not an experienced person, right?
Amazing, very rightly put it. Amit, I'll come back here, the extension of what Kavita said when it comes to investment managers. And, you spoke about optimism, you spoke about overconfidence, two O's. And when Dr. Kavita spoke about anchoring bias, and, there is a, like, there are, I always call these are the three A's and two O's. You have availability, anchoring, and adjustment biases, or you have a overconfidence, or you have a too much of optimism. Does fund managers or investment managers will also suffer such biases?
So long as they are humans, yes, because emotions are about humans. And to that extent, yes, fund managers also are likely to suffer from some of the biases or many of these biases. Having said that, there is a difference between many individual investors and the institutional investors. In case of the institutional investors, and especially if I talk about the mutual funds in India, there is a certain framework which is as prescribed by the SEBI regulations, which means the portfolio needs to be diversified. There are exposure limits on certain, on each stock and sectors and stuff like that. Number two, each investment decision has to be recorded and it is subject to review at a later stage. And there are people watching the performance, tracking the performance, monitoring their decisions on a regular basis and giving feedbacks. So having a structure, recording of the decisions, and somebody monitoring and giving feedback, these three together can help reduce the negative impact of whatever mistakes that can happen. And to that extent, though there are biases available, biases present, there are mechanisms which have been created which tend to reduce the impact. Having said that, an individual investor can also create all these things, but observation says in most cases it is either not done or it is unviable simply because the size of the portfolio is reasonably small, and to that extent, spending that much time on managing one's own money is very difficult. So to that extent, institutional investors, mutual fund managers, they tend to have a slight advantage over individual investors.
Yeah. Very rightly said, Amit. It's when I look at fund managers, when there is a process they follow. I mean, most of the times they become little less emotional while taking these investment decisions because they follow the process, and yeah, either they call it the investment philosophy statement or the process or the guidelines which they follow. But as a investors retail, like you and me, most of the times when we invested, somebody guided, or my advisor would have also told me, my planner would have told me, but I won't write down. That's the journalizing these things. Probably that will help me if I keep why I have taken the decision. Probably if I have taken this decision to invest in this SIP in particular fund for my retirement, and why I have chosen that fund, and how long I intend to invest, and what is the purpose of my investment. There will be a less possibility when I go back and see before I take a decision to redeem or swipe or change that. This is the purpose for which I put it. But coming back,
so that's where, sorry. So just to add to that point, where I forgot a couple of this thing. Number one, each scheme has an investment objective, and there is an asset allocation derived which is in line with that investment objective. Now they have to stick to it. That no compromise is possible. This itself provides a good guideline that, okay, these are the tracks laid down and the train has to run only on the tracks. Whereas in many of our individual portfolios, if I were to use the analogy of traveling, then we have taken the vehicle and we are driving somewhere in the desert where there are no roads also, and there's nobody who's gone previously. So you don't even see the tire tracks. Now, when the vehicle moves in any direction for whatever reason, it's very difficult to come back on track. Whereas having an investment process, investment objective, etc., is like laying down the tracks on the railway.
Fabulous, I think, but taking this analogy further, I mean, say there is a road which is a super highway where I am driving. There are people who are driving with their own speed. And if I am also doing something, same mistake, there is every possibility I meet with an accident. Coming back to the markets are volatile and my emotions are volatile. And then how do I end up taking right decisions? In the current scenario of the equity markets, with your experience of your book, Roller Coaster Ride, how do I manage? I know markets are volatile, now much more volatile. And at this point, I am sitting at home reading so many news and social media, and I am also volatile. Not that, I am only immobile at home, but my mind is more mobile. Either it's more on the mobile or my thinking is more mobile. And how do I manage my emotions at this point of time?
So, quoting Benjamin Graham, and you also quoted, you use the same quote from what he said. The investor's chief problem and the biggest enemy is likely to be himself. And that's where, if you look at the volatility outside, is actually far more manageable than the volatility inside. So the roller coaster that my mind goes through is often more dangerous than the roller coaster that the markets go through, because the first choice I have to not be impacted with that roller coaster. And we've seen many cases that, I mean, when you go to this Imagica out here, or when you go to a Disney World, what do? The most volatile of the roller coaster, some people simply avoid. I don't want to get into that roller coaster. Wonderful. So that's the first thing that one can do. If you think that you can't handle equity market risk, avoid. However, by avoiding that, what you're losing out and how do you make up for the potential high returns, in which manner, is equally important. So this is one of the things. However, by limiting your exposure to equity markets, you can reduce the volatility of the total portfolio. Third, volatility is a far bigger risk in the short term than it is in the longer period of time. So don't put your short-term money or medium-term money into equity markets. Only consider equity markets when you are looking at a long-term goals, funding your long-term goals. And what are these long-term and what is this long-term? A lot of times people ask this question, is 3 years long-term, is 5 years long-term? My question is very simple. If you're a 30-year-old, there's a high probability that you are going to live till 90. Now tell me, why do you worry about 3 years? You have to invest for next 60 years. think of that as long term. If you're already 50, then again, you're likely to live till 80 or 90. You're talking about 30, 40 years. Why worry about 3 or 4 years? Now, within that, if I am somebody who can't go on that super highway, like the Mumbai Pune Expressway, a friend of mine feels very uncomfortable if his vehicle is going at below 120 kilometers per hour. I feel very uncomfortable when my vehicle goes above 80 kilometers per hour. No, that's in a very simplistic manner. I've said that guy is more aggressive and I'm more conservative. In such a case, what I need to do is, by equity allocation, to only extend that minimum period that I'm looking at. So let's say I will not invest a single rupee which is required in next 7 years, whereas my friend will not invest a single rupee which is required in 3 years. The moment I've done that, in my total portfolio, my equity allocation comes down. Third, use concepts like rebalancing between equity and fixed income. You maintain a particular percentage allocation. So let's say I have a 30-year goal for which I'm investing some money in equity and some money in fixed income. How much is that some money in terms of percentages? So let's say my 70% is in equity and 30% is debt for that particular goal. Periodically, whenever equity is about 70%, I have to get out of equity partially and rebalance it back to 30 by shifting money into debt. When equity goes below 70, I sell some debt and buy equity. So when I keep doing that, that also gives that shock-proof sort of mechanism for the portfolio. The other strategy that a lot of people recommend is investing on a regular basis, the popular SIP. And when you do that, you buy when the NAV is, buy more units when the NAV is low, and you buy fewer units when the NAV is high. And over a period of time, that also helps in reducing the volatility to an extent. And finally, in spite of this, you're still a little more worried about it, then don't invest in a full equity portfolio. Look at either a hybrid fund, and within that you can also look at a category known as balanced advantage funds. So these are also low volatility products compared to a full equity portfolio. So there are various ways one can approach this whole equation, but invest in equity if your long-term goals and you need to beat inflation. You can't avoid that.
Thanks, Amit. Can you please little elaborate when you touched upon when you want to, like, all these things a common investor may or may not make the changes. It's very difficult for them. And you touched upon balanced advantage fund as a category. How that can work and that can help. You need not have taken emotions, but you just stay invested and somebody else is taking care. That is one. And second, how the asset allocation funds can play a vital role, not to act, I don't need to act. Once I invest, that asset allocation can automatically taken over.
Sure. So thanks for this. Now, when I say asset allocation, there are two approaches that you can look at. One, you create your portfolio and allocate your money across different asset categories. That's your way of doing asset allocation. And then there are funds which are available, which are called asset allocation funds, where the allocation is done within the scheme. Now, the difference between the two is, the first one, you can do customization as per your specific needs. However, you also need to be, sort of a little bit of a little more active in rebalancing at a regular frequency. If you miss out on that, then lack of discipline can sometimes hurt you. In the fund, because there is, as I said earlier, there is a mechanism, there is a structure, there is a process because of which the rebalancing automatically keeps happening within the scheme. And when that happens, you really need not take any action. So if I am busy with my own profession or occupation or job, then somebody else is anyway doing it on my behalf within that scheme. But that's like buying a ready-made shirt. So if I get a 42 size shirt, if my, over a period of time, because of the lockdown, if my waist size increases, then I can't really, I need to take another. So basically, are you taking a tailor-made portfolio which you can do yourself, or you are taking a ready-made portfolio. Ready-made portfolio also offers another advantage because the transactions happen within the scheme, within the mutual fund scheme, and mutual fund is constituted as a trust in India for the benefit of beneficiary unit holders. So to that extent, all the gains that the fund generates on account of such transactions, those are exempt from any tax, if at all. If you do it yourself, the rebalancing, whatever little capital gains or that you may have, those will be subject to taxes. So that's the other angle that we need to be aware of and then take a decision. But there are readily available funds available called asset allocation funds, and then that's something worth considering.
Wow, fantastic. I think, that's a better way to look at the easiest way I can de-emotionize my investments, I can get there. And Dr. Kavita, I'll just come back to you. I mean, this is to take better investment decisions. And most of the times investor behavior is driven by the emotions, and emotions are driven by their thinking. And that thinking is in the current scenario kind of it. And how do the investors need to handle their own behavior or their own emotions to take a right investment decisions at any given point of the time?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is to be aware of your emotions, right? To basically not be in this illusion that we will not react to losses. Yes, we are human beings, like how Amitji said, right? If we are human beings, we are bound to react to situations or make infallible decisions. So the first thing would be that to be aware of your emotions. Now, how would you be aware that you are basically making certain mistakes repeatedly? See, one off time, right? If you make a mistake, it's not such a big deal because your investment, it's a long journey. Like how again Amitji was saying that, we should plan that we are going to make investments for the next 50 years, 60 years, whatever, right? So which means that we need to journalize. So the way you react to if your stocks go up or your stocks go down, or you see your portfolio in red, the way you react and the kind of actions that you take, if you journalize them, you would be able to identify, oh, is this behavior of mine systematic, right? Am I extremely overconfident when there is a bull market and extremely fearful when there is a bear market, right? Or when I see my portfolio in red, what is it that I do? What are the like basically unprecedented things that I shouldn't be doing, but I do? So at that point of time, you wouldn't know that you're wrong. But if you step away from the situation and you read it, say after a year from now, right, you will be able to recognize, oh, this is what I did and I shouldn't be doing. So journaling is an excellent way to identify your own, if I could say, biases, or the kind of decisions that you took during emotions. Now, there's another interesting intervention if I may call it, is again, it's very popular in behavioral sciences, called nudging, right? So Richard, like you mentioned, Richard Thaler. So Richard Thaler and Cass's team, they are excellent economists and American economists, and they came out with this, with this whole view of nudging. So let me give you a simple example of nudging away from the finance industry. So imagine if children went to a cafeteria and you wanted children to reach out to healthy food, right? And we live in a society where we want to also encourage freedom. We don't want to mandate everything and curb freedom. If you do that with children, they will find their way out. Okay, so basically what they did is they did an architecture of the cafeteria such that healthy food was within easy reach. There was unhealthy food also, right? All those marshmallows and burgers and everything, but that was with difficult reach. Now what happens is that obviously if something which is in much easy reach, children will reach out to them. So the whole idea behind nudging is that you don't take away people's freedom, right? But you just architect the environment in such a way that you nudge people to basically go and do something which is much more healthy. Now, using this whole theory, what the US Department did was, so apparently when you join a firm in the US, you will have to invest like how we have our PF, right? EPF contribution, right? So they have similarly what is known as 401k plans. Okay, so they basically have a form, and in that form you have to actively say that which 401k plan you want to invest. Now, something that again, what Amitji was saying earlier, we are in a world of information overload. So I think the biggest bias we have is decision paralysis, right? And procrastination. So US has basically like more than 100 401k plans. So again, the decision, so everybody wants to invest. Of course, who doesn't want to, plan for their retirement, right? But we all procrastinate all of the time, right? So for people to choose among those 401k plans, people used to not do it. So they used to keep postponing this decision. So what the US department did was they simply changed the form. What they did is by default, your investment would go in a passive fund. Say, for example, an index fund. If you didn't want your money to go into that index fund by default, then actively you choose 401k plans where your money should go. By doing this, what happened? That the investments in this 401k plans basically rose multifold, right? So what they did is, okay, they accepted that there is this problem with people. Procrastination is a problem. Decision paralysis is a problem. Information overload is a problem, right? So they design defaults so that people would, easily, make use these defaults. And think about it. 20 years from now, if your money is lying in an index fund, and basically, you're, in the long term, obviously equity pays, right? Who would feel remorseful that, oh, I've invested in an index fund, I should have actively invested in other funds? Well, that is something that you did not do, right, at that point of time, right? So these are some ways which I think that we could accept our policies, accept our biases, and perhaps, design nudges, design defaults around us, so that we basically make, a kind of like kind of good financial decisions for ourselves.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kavita, for that, giving the decision framework or my mental model. And I'll just deviate for a topic, Amit. This is not exactly the behavioral finance, but are the investment decisions current scenario. And, the interest rates are at its low. And the decision, I may like to take some risk, or I may not, but it is not my behavior at this point. But it is like, I don't know what I need to do. Most of the investors today, they will ask, interest rates are low, what shall I do? My money is just lying in savings bank account, and I could not take any decision. It is what kind of nudge I need to do. I need to go back to Dr. Kavita, but what is that your suggestion for the debt investments?
So first of all, sir, low interest rates are a reality as we speak today. I don't know whether the rates would go up from here or go down from here, but at least today the rates are low. So let's accept that first of all. Number two, when the interest rates go down, then your debt fund investments earn you the current YTM plus a little bit of capital gains. So to that extent, there is an upside available. But if the interest rates go up, then you don't really benefit if your portfolio is long term. Now, this applies to equity markets as well. And very often it is seen that when the interest rates go down, equity markets tend to go up. And when the interest rates move up sharply, then equity markets tend to go down. Now imagine that today I've invested in fixed income, I'm not happy with the returns, and then I want to shift to equity markets. Will I be taking a right decision or not? Number one, because I don't even know whether the interest rates will go up or not. I'm not even referring to equity markets. That's point number one. Point number two is between equity and debt, how much money should be allocated with in what asset category is largely a function of an individual's specific situation. I've already highlighted that part in terms of the time horizon earlier. Now, when the time horizon is long, then consider equity, but if the time horizon is short, then it may not be wise considering the high fluctuations possible. If that's the case, what's the framework that one can use to decide how much money can go into equity and how much can go into debt? And for that, there is a sort of a 3-question framework that one can look at. One is the need to take risk. And this need to take risk is a function of how much returns does one need over and above the safe rate of return. Now, what is a safe rate of return? Any of the safe debt fixed income instruments you pick up and take that as a benchmark. So you can look at a bank deposit or so as a safe return benchmark. Anything above that, and you got to take some risk. That's number one. So if your all your goals, all your future goals can be easily met by keeping money in a savings account, then there is no need to take any risk at all. That's point number one. If not, then you've got to take risk. Number two, what is your ability to take risk? Now, this ability to take risk is more financial and not the other ability, which is what I'm coming to in as a third question. But this financial ability is a function of the gap between income and expenses. Higher the gap between income and expenses, the ability is higher. If the expenses are as close as income, then your ability is lower. The gap between assets and liabilities, number two. If the assets are far more in excess of liabilities, then the ability is higher. Number three, time to goal. Longer the time horizon to the goal, you have a higher ability to take risk because there's a potential that you can recoup in the middle. Number four, how many people are contributing to that investment pool and how many people need to be fed from that income or investment pool, which means number of earning members versus number of dependent members. And I'm deliberately talking about that income pool or investment pool because the ability to take risk for a young earner is far higher than somebody who's already retired and drawing money from the portfolio. So these are some things that you need to look at. And then comes the third question. The first is need, second is ability, third is willingness. Willingness is the psychological ability to take risk. Can I sleep at night after investing my money somewhere? That's a simple acid test. If I'm going to lose sleep, then there is a much higher probability that I will be swayed by those emotions and take wrong decisions. And those wrong decisions are a far bigger risk than the risk posed by any investment avenue. So use this framework to decide at how much allocation should be between equity and debt. And if that changes, then only change the allocation between equity and debt, not because of interest rates going up or down. That would be a colossal mistake.
And fantastic. I think, fabulous for that framework to follow. I request now audience to please drop your questions in Q&A or the chat box. You can be specific if you want that question to be going to Dr. Kavita or Amit or any other general questions. Either it's on the behavior or it's on the investment or anything related to the emotions in the markets we can have. In the meanwhile, I got a couple of questions from the audience by mail. And this is a question coming from Amit only. And I'll ask this question to Amit itself. Is it the good time to redeem my investments from the mutual funds?
Well, that's a question where there is no general answer.
And the follow-up question is there with him is, I invested heavily in pharma. Can I hold or get out?
Okay. So first of all, let's address the second question first, because that's an easier one to answer. No specific view on any sector or industry, whether the pharma companies are going to do better in future than today, I don't know. And even if the companies do better in the future, will the stock do better in the future or not? I don't know. Because a lot of times what happens is when the whole market collectively thinks that this particular sector has a very bright future, very often that view turns out to be absolutely right. But the stocks have already priced that fact in, which means the stocks are already costly. While the sector does very well, the stock may not. So there is also a possibility, and we've seen that in the previous time periods where certain sector was perceived to be the sector of the future or sunrise sector, but the stocks were already high. Or sometimes somebody felt that this particular company is going to go down in the dumps, and the stock had already been beaten down. So there is a difference between a sector doing well and the stock doing well. So you've got to understand that equation. So generally, it is advisable that you invest in a diversified portfolio so that you don't really need to take the sectoral calls. Point number one. Now let's come back to the first question. Mutual fund, if you've invested in open-ended mutual funds, any day you can redeem. So that is an operational feature available with open-ended mutual funds. Operational feature versus whether you should actually exploit that feature or not is a different thing. Do you need money? What are you going to do with that money if you take it out? Do you have a plan for that? If you don't have a plan for that, if you don't know about a better opportunity than this current investment, then it is better not to touch. Very often, let's take the example of a pharma sector fund, and I'm just taking this as an example. And what I've observed in the past is a lot of times investors have taken money out of one pharma sector fund only to invest in another pharma sector fund. That serves no purpose. It's like digging a road on one day and filling it up the next day. That's not productivity. That's not a productivity activity. Instead, let it stay there. You just don't know out of these two funds which is going to do better in future. So don't even bother about it. That's number one. Number two, are you trying to rebalance your portfolio because a particular sector has gone up as a total percentage of your portfolio? Then in that case, it's a good idea to pare down the exposure and shift money elsewhere where the portfolio allocation has shrunk in comparison to the intended or the target percentage. So have a plan before taking this decision about what to do with the proceeds. Otherwise, it's better to stay as it is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amit. Thanks for the detailed answer. Dr. Kavita, this question comes to you. This is Akhil Saxena. He is asking a question like, I created my emergency fund, but unfortunately my emergency fund is in a liquid fund. And whenever I urgently need some money, it is not exactly emergency. I have a tendency to redeem because there is an instant redemption option is available. And how do I get away from that kind of behavior where I should not touch that money?
Interesting. So yeah, so basically, so the issue is that because it's a liquid fund, so basically going by the nomenclature, right? Because it is a liquid fund, this person is, is, even though he doesn't have an emergency, he is basically redeeming it. Am I right in understanding it?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so yeah, so again, going back, I think one of the most fundamental things that we need to do is, even going to the previous, the question that the previous person asked is, we need to have very goal-based, allocations, right? So we make investments. Why? We make investments for certain goals. And if that certain goal needs to be performed, right, then it makes sense to to kind of use the money to redeem the money, irrespective of whether it is high, whether it is low, whether it is below your expectations or not. Only then it makes sense to redeem the money, right? So if you actively go for a goal-based sense of investment, then even though you are invested in a liquid fund, you don't have an emergency, you should basically not touch it. So the whole idea of investing in a liquid and creating an emergency fund is you have to earmark it for emergencies. The other way this person can handle it is maybe journal what are emergencies, right? So
Right.
say these are the emergencies. So suppose you journal it and you say, and these are the emergencies. Now in your mind you have mentally mapped it. Oh, right, a medical hospitalization is an emergency. We need to deal with hospital bills, right? So only then I will touch my emergency fund, right? So, maybe his and children's education, a top up in children's education, maybe that came as an emergency, right? Only then you will redeem this emergency fund, right? Somebody who comes and seeks help from you, right? So in my family, we basically have set up a fund like this, which is only meant to, help. So basically, if somebody comes and asks you suddenly for money, it's very difficult, out of the blue to, pull it out of your savings, right? So we have developed a fund like this, right? So if you basically journal and say these are the, situations of emergency, only then you will touch this emergency fund, maybe it will become easier for this person.
Fabulous. I think.
Just to add to that point, and this is where some of the financial advisors are using this principle of nudge. So what they do is they link all the investments to certain goals. Now, it is possible that this liquid fund is also linked to some goals. In the moment, so what Kavita mentioned was define emergencies. And the other side of that is that liquid fund is linked to this particular goal. If there is, if that goal is not come yet, then don't touch this money. So you put two mental locks or use those two anchors, define emergency, and take the funds to your goals.
Yeah, Amit, here the tendency what happens is since you have an option, just swipe of button, easily available liquidity, people tend to ignore that, and that's where it comes in. It's for example, I've seen when we do this program called Fauji Nivesh, we go to the army base camps, and 70 to 80% of our Fauji buys, they redeem their provident fund money for their annual transfer, because there is a provision to withdraw. They don't understand that. So that's where you have a mental, it's availability bias, and then you just look at, and you are not looking at little more beyond the future.
It is exactly in line with the supermarket that Kavita was describing, where the marshmallows and burgers are kept out of reach, whereas the healthy food is kept within reach.
Yeah.
So in this case, because of this electronic facility of swiping left or right and redeeming the money, that's as easy as it can get, and it is absolutely accessible. So it's also a design issue, actually.
Right.
Yeah, probably my answer little more to Akhil Saxena is before swiping the left, I mean, use your right brain, whether it is right or wrong, and whether you want to redeem, and then give a pause a minute, whether it's I need to, there is an option to available. That is one. And if it is a money met for an emergency fund, probably don't keep that option of taking that money from that pocket. Maybe put some small money there, and otherwise you just keep that money little. It's reachable, but not immediately reachable. That's another way to look at. And here is the next question coming to you, Amit. It's Amrinder Pal. I mean, he says, I am 65-year-old and falling into the highest tax bracket, and my FDs are maturing. I want to invest in the debt funds. Which category would you suggest?
So within debt categories, assuming that you're looking at short and medium term investments, because you are fixed.
I have sufficient investments in equity. He says I have sufficient investments.
No, so, right. Exactly. So I'm assuming that these are short and medium term fixed deposits which you want to shift to debt funds. And in such a case, I would say for the requirements of 2 to 3 years, and you mentioned that you are 65 years age, I'm assuming that you are retired. So there is no active source of income out of work. So it's an assumption. So in such a case, the next 2 to 3 years of the goals that you may have, use liquid funds and ultra short category of funds for your investments. These are reasonably safe funds. But anything beyond 3 years, then consider two categories of funds. One is the corporate debt fund, and second is the banking and PSU debt fund. Again, I'm simply saying because you are shifting from bank deposit, that's why I'm suggesting these two categories. But if you have the appetite for taking slightly higher risk even on the fixed income portfolio, then some allocation you may consider in the credit risk funds also. But only if you want to try that risk out. Otherwise, stick to corporate debt funds, which are highly rated corporate debt papers or banking and PSU debt funds, which are also reasonably safe papers. Now, what happens is because you are investing for 3 years and longer, and then stay in growth option, not the income, what's that? Income distribution and capital withdrawal option, the new name for us, it was known as a dividend option. So stick to the growth option so that whatever the fund earns, the fund's earning is tax exempt, and to that extent, the compounding within the fund happens at a pre-tax rate. It is only when you withdraw, only the capital gain component out of that withdrawal is subject to long-term capital gains tax, and I'm saying 3 years plus period. So to that extent, your overall portfolio also becomes stable, and it's a good choice.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Kavita, this is an interesting question for you. This is coming from Shashwat. I'm a financial advisor. I mean, I consider to be one of the good financial advisors for my investors. But when it comes to my investments, I take a lot of irrational decisions. Do I need to employ another financial advisor for me?
So incidentally, just, last conversation I had with Amit ji, we were discussing this IKEA effect. Okay, so basically what is an IKEA effect is, we all know IKEA, right? So do it yourself, right? You get that, you basically get that furniture home, and you have this thrill of doing it yourself. So you put everything together, and then at the end of it, you feel that, oh, I have achieved something, right? So we were just discussing this. I mean, is this, how does this happen in the investment world? And something very interesting Amit ji said. He said that when you go to an IKEA store, everything is basically, all the nuts, bolts, all the parts of the furniture, everything is basically, provided to you, right? Only thing you have to do is assemble it, right? So that is why you have this thrill. Now imagine if you have to go scouting for the nuts, bolts, and you have to basically go and find every piece of good furniture, a good raw material to make that furniture. Then would IKEA be, popular? Or, would you have the thrill of assembling everything yourself, right? So I think this is also the same issue when we try to, build the portfolio ourselves. So also, when you give advice to somebody else, right? I mean, bhar ke aata hai, and you're basically, right, you're very rational at that point of time when you have to give advice to somebody else. But if you have to reason and think about it yourself, again goes back to the whole idea of like, even though you may be a professional, all of us succumb to emotional biases. That is the reason why I think that, yes, if you're not able to handle, your portfolio beyond a reasonable attempt, then you will need to basically, employ a financial advisor for yourself. So I do this for myself. So my family keeps teasing me, and please don't go and tell this to my family, but they keep saying this, oh, you give this financial literacy, all these talks. But I know when it comes to myself, procrastination is my biggest enemy. So I've realized I very actively depend on financial advisors to basically, do good of my bias.
Fantastic. I do have my financial advisor. That is where my life is more comfortable because
because it's good to know both of you do that.
Yeah, because there are few possibilities.
I have to go and tell this to my family that I'm not the only one.
And not only for the decision making, it's sometimes a lot of money lying in savings bank account. I won't even take the decision. And sometimes I just forget what purpose I have done, and this person will always helps me to take, not to get panicky, or second opinion to me. And sometimes some unattained, some goals. For example, I had one investment going on for my holiday. That's a short-term goal, and I can't even think of that holiday. Now that short-term goal he converted into a long-term goal. How I can make that very differently? It was into the debt fund. That money has moved to the equity, and fortunately it has moved into the equity at right time because of his decision. It has almost doubled for me. And my next holiday destination can be better whenever it is opened. That's and it's the last question to both of you. And before we conclude, if I can go to Dr. Kavita here, that what is that one lesson this pandemic would have taught you, and which has changed your behavior? in terms of investments or in terms of generic?
Right. So at the beginning, you asked me this question. I think the first question that you kind of asked me is, how do you think emotions impact, our financial well-being, right? But, if we could just flip that question, how, if you are already financially, you're designed, you have a financial discipline, say, right? How would that impact your emotion at this point of time? Right, so I think if we have a good financial discipline and we basically accept that we are human beings, we have biases, we have policies, and we are basically cognizant of all these kind of biases, emotions, and we get into a kind of a discipline when it comes to managing money. I think we will be in a better situation to handle situations like COVID, or unprecedented, something which we cannot even imagine. So this kind of financial discipline, I would say, is very important, and it should basically start from the school. From school, children should be basically taught how to basically manage their money well.
Very good.
Sir,
Very thank. Go
I
to you,
would-
Amit.
Yeah, I would actually try to draw a parallel between the present situation that many Indians have faced and the way the portfolio should be handled. So first of all, as Kavita said, I mean, accept that we are humans. We are not infallible. We are vulnerable to a lot of things. Similarly, let's also accept that a lot is not in our control. A lot of things are not in our control. So
Right.
many of us have seen family members suffering, family members spending days in the hospital, and you are not even allowed to meet them because this is a highly infectious disease. So you want to go and do something, all you have to do is wait. So that patience is just not there. Most of us are action oriented. But right now, what to do is to simply trust the doctors and let them do their job. Now, draw parallel in the world of investing. Once I have given the money to a portfolio manager to manage, a fund manager to manage, then I have to simply sit and do nothing. Let him or her handle that money because they are the best at that job. Number two, we also feel that I should get all the reports, I should know all the vital parameters. So what am I going to do with knowing all the vital parameters? The patient is in the best hands. The doctors are taking care of it. Whether I know that the oxygen saturation is 92 or 95 or 89, what am I going to do? Nothing. Doctors are taking care of it. Don't look at your values very often. It doesn't help. It only increases your anxiety because the day the oxygen level drops from 91 to 90, your BP goes up. Similarly, in case of a mutual fund, when the NAV goes from 90 to 89, your BP is likely to go up. Why did this happen?
Yeah.
Don't look at the values so regularly. This is another lesson. Lesson number 3, in the end, once you have given your money to the best people, trust them. But if you have to trust somebody for the long term, you also have got to taken care of your short term. And that's where the role of this emergency fund is something that a lot of people have realized. Now, look at emergency funds in multiple ways. Number one, currently when the interest rates are low, your emergency funds may be earning 3% or 5% per year, nothing more than that, and you are not happy with it. But now just go back a year, and when the equity markets fell by 38%, a liquid fund delivering 3% at that point in time outperformed equity by 41%. Think about it. And the presence of that liquid fund ensured that you did not have to touch equity funds, pull money out of equity at the wrong time. Once in 10 years, once in 5 years, when a crash happens, the value that liquid fund provides is immense. Even when you did not need that money, the principle that Charlie Munger says, in the long-term investing, compounding matters. And compounding to work, you got to ensure that you don't interrupt that process of compounding. It is the cash in the portfolio which ensures that you don't interrupt the process of compounding. So these are some of the profound lessons that I have learned. Some of them we knew, it just got reinforced.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those wonderful lessons from both of you. Indeed, it's a great take back. I'm not repeating those because of the paucity of time, but it was one of those great lessons. You know, stick to your basics and stay back there, and it is all. And like this is a time not only taking care of your investments, but taking care of yourself is the most important part for each one of you. And taking care of your health, then it comes the wealth. And you know, your well-being is equally financial well-being and your physical well-being and your emotional well-being. A combination is holistic well-being. And thanks for joining us today. It's like, you know, this COVID as the word itself has become so negative. I was just looking at what is an antidote to deal with the COVID. I said you can redefine the COVID with a different COVID. You talk it in a very different. For me, I was telling one of my friends who was in hospital. I said, like, you know, what is that? Before you take the vaccine, the COVID ke liye, you just define the moment you think of the COVID word, you put it in a hospital and a chit. C means, you know, he has to have a courage. That courage, that, you know, C is a courage, O is an optimism, and V is vaccine, and vaccine of hope and vaccine of compassion. And I is I develop my immunity, and D is I have a discipline. That discipline, I'll tackle this. And coming back, we go back and let us be very positive. Let us be optimistic that we come out of it very soon. And that HOPE is something like this, you know, hold on. Hope is hold on, pain ends. And it's only at the end of the tunnel. It's like we can see that light around. And as we wear the mask now, let us wear the mask of hope. As we are looking in the lockdown, probably all the emotions, Dr. Kavita said, let us lock down our own fear. And we have a social distance. Probably sometimes let us social distance from the social media, and also social distance from your portfolio valuations. Don't look at how it fluctuates. It is not fluctuating much, but don't worry even if it fluctuates. And the last one, last but not the least, is vaccine of compassion and vaccine of optimism. Because compassion is we need to go and support somebody either financially or emotionally, or be there with someone and talk to someone. Some of us are blessed, and some of our colleagues, friends are not so blessed, and it's the time for us to go and contribute there. And wishing you all the good luck and happy health. I invite Dimple for
before that, just one point on the hope that you mentioned, and this reminded me of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. 7th May was his birth anniversary, and he has beautifully written faith. He says faith is that bird that starts singing when the dawn is still dark. So even when everything looks dark right now, all that we can keep is faith, and that's the maximum in demand or requirement at this stage. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. I think, you know, probably we need to wear the mask of the faith now. That's the best way to. And, you know, thank you so much to both of you for being such a wonderful panelist. And over to you, Dimple, for this opportunity to be with Money Gurukul. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed a very interesting session. I would also like to thank our speakers, Mr. Amit Trivedi and Dr. Kavita. It was a pleasure hearing you all speak on issues like, you know, the trends that have changed over the times, biases in investing and investment risks, among the other issues that you touched upon today during the session. I hope that this session leaves the viewers with a lot of rewarding insights. I also thank the audience as well for being a part of the Economic Times Money Gurukul conversation. We look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a good day. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think somebody is asking Mr. Abhay Mondal for the, can you please share the recording link? It will be available on the YouTube of Money Gurukul very soon. Yeah, thank you so much and take care, and God bless you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, and do get vaccinated and take care of your immunity. And, you know, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
See you then. Bye.